With Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access possibly a few weeks away, now is the time to catch up with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition mechanics to understand how the game works. Each week, we will break down certain rule sets based on the player's handbook, and we will connect these with the information we know in Baldur's Gate 3. Hi everyone, I'm Wisa of Content Critters, here to teach you the basics of D&D 5e for Baldur's Gate 3. If you're interested in more Baldur's Gate 3 lore, news, and guides, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell to receive notifications when new videos go live. Without further ado, let's begin. In the gameplay demos, you will notice polyhedral dice rolls when characters are either engaged in dialogue or when they're preoccupied in combat. These are encounters where the character rolls a 20-sided die or a D20 to do, say, a perception check when they're searching for a hidden lever, or a persuasion check when they're trying to convince others to agree with their train of thought. Rolling a d20 is also essential in combat as it tells us whether a casted fireball hits or misses the enemy. This is otherwise known as attack rolls. In the tabletop version of D&D, you roll a polyhedral dice with different numbers of sides. There's a d4, which is a 4-sided die, a d8 or an 8-sided die, and so on. In the event of an encounter, rules dictate the roll you have to make. So for example, you have to roll 2d6 plus 4. This means that you roll 2 6-sided dice, add these, and add 4 to the total number. In Baldur's Gate 3, all of these computations in accordance with the D&D 5th edition rule set will be done by the code, so what you will see is whether or not your roll is a success or a failure. So for instance, Shadowheart is talking to this goblin, trying to convince him why she's in their camp. After choosing the intelligence dialogue option, her target number is revealed to be equal to or greater than 10, the number above the dice. Since she rolls a 20, Shadowheart successfully deceives the goblin. If the total number equals or exceeds the target number, the corresponding action is a success. Otherwise, it's a failure. It's also important to note that fractions are rounded down even if the number is 1/2 or greater. When you make a roll, ability scores and modifiers are taken into account. There's also a proficiency bonus to reflect the character's skill, spells, and class features added to the total number. More on these in the next videos. Now let's move on to ability scores, modifiers, and checks. Ability scores measure the extent of a character's ability in terms of their training and competence. These scores for adventurers range from 3 to 18, while for monsters it's 1 to 30. So for instance, a strength score of 11 is the middle ground, whereas a strength score of 18, or in some cases 20, is considered excellent. On the other hand, monsters and divine beings can have ability scores as high as 30. Now each ability is accompanied by an ability modifier from -5, starting at an ability score of 1, up to +10 for an ability score of 30. Besides consulting the table you now see on the screen, there is an alternative computation method to know the ability modifier. You can do this by subtracting 10 from the ability score and by dividing the total by 2, rounding the answer down. These modifiers affect both ability checks and attack rolls. Ability checks, on the other hand, tests a character's capability in overcoming challenges. This is usually called when attempting to do an action besides attacking enemies. Again, the code will do the necessary computations to decide the ability that is best suited to undergo a check for the task at hand. Say rolling a dexterity check when you decide to hide from a goblin. Now that we've discussed ability scores, modifiers, and checks, it's time to break down the 6 abilities. These are strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and constitution. Strength measures your character's athletic ability, meaning how much physical power he or she can exert, such as forcefully opening a heavily barricaded door. When attacking using a melee weapon such as a BATTLEAXE, you add your strength modifier to both your attack and damage rolls. This determines whether or not you manage to hit and possibly slice your opponent's arm off. In addition, your strength score also determines the maximum weight you can carry. So if you choose a tiny character, say a halfling, and you wish to hoard a bunch of potions and gear in your inventory, then you have to double your carrying capacity by investing more points in strength. Your carrying capacity, which is in pounds, is computed by multiplying your strength score by 15. Next is Dexterity, which measures agility, acrobatics, and stealth. So for example, you wish to pick a brutally complex lock or to disable an enchanted trap thanks to a certain fiend. Then investing in more dexterity points becomes essential. When it comes to attack and damage rolls, you add your dexterity modifier when using a ranged weapon such as a longbow or a melee weapon that has a finesse property like a dagger. In addition, your dexterity score determines stealth or the ability to conceal yourself from enemies. In Baldur's Gate 3, this means hiding in the dark or in the shadows. In addition to this light and dark system, the game also features a binary structure where the enemy can either see you or not. This will probably be based on the enemy's own perception or wisdom check to actively search for your presence. If this is higher than your dexterity check, then the enemy will spot you. In D&D 5e, you also make a dexterity check at the start of every combat to determine who among your characters will go first. In Baldur's Gate 3, there's going to be a linear initiative order where characters are placed randomly. Those with higher dexterity scores will receive bonuses in terms of who gets to go first in combat. It's also important to remember that if two characters are together, meaning there is literally no enemy between them, and they are in the same initiative order, they are allowed to go first simultaneously. Third, we have Intelligence, which measures reasoning and mental acuity. Intelligence checks come into play when you need to recall lore about certain spells via Arcana, or when you investigate clues to help solve a murder, which the Dead 3 may have planned all along. Next, there's Wisdom, which measures perception, insight, and intuition based on how you feel about the world around you. This is where perception and survival checks materialize. Perception checks allow you to spot or hear the presence of something you wouldn't normally detect, such as a hidden lever hiding behind a luscious green bush. On the other hand, survival checks allow you to actively avoid natural hazards such as storms and quicksands. Charisma measures the ability to effectively interact with others through eloquence and influence. In Charisma, there are multiple skills that are subjected to checks such as Deception, Intimidation, and Persuasion. These are actually reflected in the dialogues we've seen so far in Baldur's Gate 3.
Good. Makes the next part that much more straightforward. What's better than a devil you don't know?
Lastly, we have Constitution, which measures endurance pertaining to health and stamina. For example, you wish to dive into the river Kionthar to pick up an expensive necklace while holding your breath in the process. Then adding more points to increase your Constitution is important. Note, however, that Constitution checks are uncommon unlike other ability checks, since endurance is passive, so we may not often see this in the game. What abilities will you focus on when making your character? What did you think of this first guide video? Let me know in the comments section below. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. I'll be back again this week for more Baldur's Gate 3 lore.